Remains a major problem. It has also demonstrated the importance of providing quality information to home buyers. Over time, the closing process has become more complex, making these consumer disclosures even more critical. The recent abuses we have seen in the mortgage market have in part been exacerbated by a lack of such protections. RESPA was initially established to provide these very safeguards, but clearly they are not working in today's housing market. At its very foundation are the good faith estimate and the HUD 1 form, which provide home buyers with basic information concerning the cost of their purchase. Unfortunately, HUD's recent proposal to update these forms as well as the settlement process is not the cure-all that home buyers need. The rule creates additional paperwork and complexity, potentially adding to the confusion of an already stressful purchase. This could lead to information overload and ultimately result in more uncertainty for consumers. In addition to these problems, it will create chaos for small settlement service providers. These firms play a key role in the home buying process, and they stand to incur billions of dollars in costs due to the implementation of the RESPA regulation. Aside from the enormous costs posed to small businesses, it also creates an environment in which they are placed on an unlevel playing field. While HUD asserts that volume discounting will provide consumers with savings, we know better. It will lead to the bundling of services and reduce competition by forcing small firms out of business. As a result, consumers will ultimately face higher prices. It is my expectation that Stephen Preston, who President Bush recently nominated to be Secretary of HUD, will help address these problems. We know Mr. Preston well on this committee, and I am hopeful that he will utilize his experience as head of the SBA to ensure the RESPA rule does not unnecessarily burden small firms. The changes the proposed rule makes to the settlement and closing process come at a challenging time in the housing market. It is important that we closely examine this modification so its recovery is not undermined. We also have a responsibility to protect home buyers by ensuring that they are given information about loan terms and closing fees in a clear, easy to understand manner. Today's hearing will begin to answer these questions and make sure that we're not doing more harm than good to the home buying process. I look forward to today's testimony and thank all the witnesses again for coming here to share their views. I now yield to Ranking Member Chabot for his opening statement.
I thank the Chairwoman for yielding, and I want to thank her once again for holding this important hearing on the Department of Housing and Urban Development's proposed changes to rules implementing the Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act, or RESPA. This is the committee's third hearing on HUD's plan to modify regulations governing the real estate settlement process. Although HUD has made significant strides since the committee last examined this issue back in January of 2004, I remain concerned about the procedures used to assess the economic impact that the proposal will have on small businesses operating in the residential real estate market. I certainly concur with the idea that the complex process associated with the purchase of a home can and should be simplified. Given the state of the housing market in certain areas of the country, including my home state of Ohio, and we just happened to have the governor of Ohio in for a meeting this morning, the Ohio delegation did, there is no doubt that a more transparent process on the front end may ameliorate problems on the back end, thereby potentially reducing the number of foreclosures. The effort to reduce confusion and increase transparency in the real estate process should not be borne solely by small businesses. The Regulatory Flexibility Act, or RFA, requires federal agencies to consider the impact of their proposed rules on small businesses and determine whether there are any practical alternatives that would reduce the adverse effects on small business while still achieving the agency's regulatory objectives. In the case of the proposed RESPA rules, HUD must assess alternatives that increase transparency and assist consumers, but do not necessarily pose undue burdens on small businesses that play a vital role in the operation of the residential real estate market. In particular, the Department's initial regulatory flexibility analysis and regulatory impact study used data from 2002 and 2004. The data may be accurate, but clearly do not reflect the current turbulence in the residential real estate market. An accurate analysis under the RFA requires an assessment of the regulation in the context of the current economy, not in the economy of 5 years ago. I will be interested in hearing from HUD how it plans to update this data to reflect current economic conditions. I also will be interested in hearing from our other witnesses how changes in the marketplace affect their capacity to implement regulatory changes. I'm also concerned that HUD did not perform a detailed assessment of the consequences of volume pricing on the future viability of small businesses. There's no doubt that volume discounts will benefit consumers and may provide marginal assistance in improving the residential real estate market. However, the long-term consequences of reduced competition may argue against making changes that will further shrink an already troubled sector of our small business economy. Finally, I also would like to hear from our witnesses whether this is an appropriate time to commence this type of significant rulemaking change. The focus of the Department's resources should be on helping the ailing housing sector, not implementing new regulations that might divert some of these resources away from the more critical mission of restoring health to our housing sector. Once that is done, the Department could turn its attention to its modification of rules to implement RESPA. I want to thank the witnesses for taking the time to come here to testify this morning, and I'll conclude by just noting that I'm also the ranking member of the Antitrust Task Force of the Judiciary Committee, and we're holding a hearing at 11 o'clock, and all the 5 heads of the oil companies are being hauled in. They've been thrashed over in the Senate, and now they'll be thrashed here in the House. And so I have to attend that particular thrashing. And Mary Fallon from Oklahoma will be sitting in for me, and she'll be here shortly. And I want to again thank the Chairwoman for holding this hearing.